We are moving on to war.
Yeah, baby. War crime time. Let's do it. Let's do
There
those
is
war crimes. Get
plenty,
in. We're doing
plenty
a
to.
war crime.
Yeah, get in. Oh, I didn't put it in the proper order. Okay, so on Friday, the ICJ came down with their not verdict, which I know a lot of U.S. media was trying to say, oh, well, they didn't call it a genocide. But that's not what they were supposed to do at that point. They were just supposed to judge whether or not there was enough there to do a trial, which could go on for years. And they absolutely said there was, so much so that they even in their reading of that, it's not a decision, but sorry, I've had something in my eye, a dog hair in my eye.
No, but their tentative ruling essentially called for immediate action in a lot of areas to not genocide. They didn't expressly call it a genocide, but they said Israel must do these steps to not genocide now.
And all other states in the world have a responsibility to help prevent a genocide if they happen to see one going on.
Right. So the ICJ, which we essentially created and control, is siding with Palestine on this issue.
Yeah, with South Africa and Palestine.
Are the facts of the case.
Right, exactly. So since that decision, this is I think it's pronounced Thacker, but I'm not sure. He's a journalist with The Intercept. Since the International Court of Justice ruled 5 days ago that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, Israeli forces have reportedly killed 818 Palestinians and injured 1,462. Also, since that announcement, Israeli forces reported, Hind, a 6-year-old girl, watched as Israeli forces shot and killed her family inside the car she was in. Footage showing Israeli soldier echoing Netanyahu's rhetoric, we killed thousands of Amaleks. Morally, every Arab is a suspicious entity. Footage showing Israeli soldier forcing a busload of kidnapped Palestinians to praise his family and say they will be his family's slave. New BBC story, UNICEF says its biggest concern is for an estimated 19,000 children who are orphaned or who have ended up alone. Palestinians are eating animal fodder. Between 50 and 62% of all buildings in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. 30 handcuffed, blindfolded, executed bodies found in a school in northern Gaza. This is the journalists discovered 50 bodies of Palestinians tied up and executed in Khan Yunis. These are the prisoners of war kidnapped by Israel's military, and they are in white disposable coveralls, blindfolded, barefoot, and with numbers written on their back. The latest thing that is an absolute war crime, there's me with my glasses because I can't see. And I'm sure, we didn't pull the video because it's just showing these, it's like watching snuff films. I mean, it's so horrifying, but Israeli soldiers dressed as doctors and Palestinian civilians going inside a hospital and assassinating 3 patients. Those patients those 3 were claimed by,
of course,
Hamas. Well, they claim that they were Hamas, but also Hamas and some other group claimed them. So possibly they were. I think one of them was like a spokesperson, but they were also in a hospital lying there. Like you could take them as a prisoner of war. And also it was in the West Bank, not in Gaza. It was in the West Bank where the IDF controls it entirely. So there was no need for what they did.
No, and what they did is it's literal terror.
Terrorism.
Under the definition of terrorism, but it is to cause terror. Because they've destroyed every hospital. They've bombed every single fucking hospital. Remember when there was a debate about, that wasn't our bomb that went there. We don't target hospitals. And then you accidentally bombed every hospital, every single one. So this is causing if you're a Palestinian, you are fearful of everything that exists. There's no safe place.
No safe place. I mean, refugee camps, schools. Yeah, and I mean the list goes on and on. The not the worst. There's so many horrible things. This is another thing. The cemeteries that they've destroyed. I think 16, 17 cemeteries that they've just dug up. So you can't even allow your dead to rest in peace because they are bulldozing up buried bodies in cemeteries. It's
What
yeah,
we're getting is this, of course. The U.S. and Israel are essentially both ignoring, attacking the decision, and pretending they won with the
yeah,
decision. So they're creating this fog of it's complicated, like they have with the entire conflict from the beginning, 20,
right.
30 years ago, like 50
75,
years
yeah,
ago, 75
yeah,
years ago.
yeah,
But they want people to be confused about what the right response is and think it's a nuanced situation. It provides defense for people to not get it educated on what's actually happening to Palestine.
yeah, yeah. And it is really horrifying to see that it had absolutely no effect at all on carrying out these atrocities. And then the next is this what? Okay,
It was
before
a
we go to
day or
the
two.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, it was on the same day, I think. But I did just want to say that this is really interesting, and I hadn't realized this, but Hamas stopped firing at Tel Aviv just after South Africa filed its application to the ICJ on December 29th. All of January, as the ICJ set a date, heard arguments, and then gave their orders, Hamas didn't fire a single rocket at Tel Aviv. They said just before the ICJ announced its decision that they would abide by a ceasefire order from the ICJ. Then on Friday, the ICJ orders came. Israel kept bombing. US and company then went after UNWRA, which we're about to talk about. Only then did Hamas resume strikes at Tel Aviv. Well, I mean, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got two sides here in this war, and one side is saying we'll abide by the International Court of Justice, and one side isn't.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. One of the reasons that they did not call for a ceasefire is because this is not a war between two nations and two militaries. This is an occupying nation with an enormous military being sponsored by the most powerful country in the world, financially and militarily, fighting against, like, waging war on its occupied territory. So to call for a ceasefire would imply that it's two nations, and it's not, which is part of,
right, because Palestine is essentially being pummeled, and they are powerless. So any action by them, even if it's atrocious, is a whole different level of violence compared to what Israel can unleash on them and has been unleashing on them. So, for Palestine or Hamas to stop lobbing their few bombs that get blocked every time by their massive
rockets, the
great shield we've spent billions of dollars on.
The defense, what is that? The Iron Dome?
Iron Dome.
Yeah. But then that wasn't enough, because not only are they killing, like directly bombing and killing Palestinians, civilians, but the thought and part of the genocide is that the starvation and disease are going to kill hundreds of thousands of Palestinians even after the war ends, the massacres end. And the one group that provides for Palestinians is UNWRA, right? So right away, Wall Street Journal comes out, and this was on the 29th. Oh, you were right. 24th, 5th, 6th. Oh God, Pat, I hate saying it. You were right. It wasn't on the same day.
We need a graphic with the video and explosions and shit that just comes on.
Pat was right. It wasn't on the same day. Okay. The one time I was right. No, I'm kidding. So even in that little subheading, so it says intelligence reveals details of UN agency. So that's UNRWA, the UN agency, the Works Relief Agency, links to October 7th attack. Around 10% lie of Palestinian ad agencies, 12,000 staff in Gaza have links to militants, according to intelligence dossier. And this was written by this David Lunhow and Carrie Keller-Lynn. So
yeah, and you know they're using Kevin Bacon level of like a friend of a friend of a friend who is once worked for the Palestinian Authority or something, who has a connection to Hamas or something. It's just absurd. The UN fired like 8 people, I think, over it.
I think they fired 7 of them. Yeah, and they started an investigation, and 2 of them are dead. So right, but to pull the major funding of the biggest humanitarian effort that is happening food,
over there,
schools, it's shelter, it's hospitals,
shortly after the UN says this is a genocide and you're going to be starving. They literally are telling me part of their order essentially was that you need to provide massive amounts of humanitarian aid and you're not doing it now. And then following that ruling, we pull out all of the major source of humanitarian aid for these people.
It is so vile, and nobody is doing anything. And Cora, if Israel and Western leaders aren't charged with war crimes, at least by the ICC, the international courts will have no legitimacy. But there's the International Hague Act that started in 2002, which is the U.S. will invade The Hague if any U.S. citizen is charged by the ICC with a war crime.
This is our rules-based order that we put on the rest of the world. We say if you trade with China, or we have all these crazy rules,
sanctions, this and that.
You're breaking international law if you do this, and countries are now flaunting. They are ignoring that entirely, as they should. But it just shows we are losing our stature in the world. This empire is falling in a hurry. We are bombing hard right now, like as a country, and we should be.
So a few things. One is the number now went from 12 down to 4, and of course because of StreamYard I couldn't upload that graphic, but went from 12 down to 4 that they are now claiming were let me just see, because I think I have it right here. I'll just read. So it went down from 12 to 4 out of 30,000 UNRWA employees that they have now changed. Israeli intelligence report claims 4 were involved in Hamas kidnappings. So that's number one. That just came out today. Then the other thing is they started uncovering that reporter, the woman, Carrie Keller-Lynn, was an IDF soldier and best friends with this woman right here, who is an IDF spokesperson and runs the social media for the IDF. So that's who's doing the investigative reporting with some dossier. And as somebody asked in the chat, they haven't said what the dossier is or who provided it. Right? They're saying, what, the IDF, Israeli intelligence? Everything that they've talked about so far has been lies. Every single accusation they've made has been debunked.
And all you have to do is look, take all the claims on face value, and that's enough to dismiss it as like not a reason to shut down the aid coming in. It's if there were 12 people, do you stop aid to a whole country of people because of 12 people out of 30,000?
Right. Especially because UNRWA said that they will investigate. They fired the people. I mean, now if they fired 7 people, but only 4 apparently have been linked by the Israeli intelligence. But that is collective punishment, which is a war crime.
So these are the countries committing genocide right now by pulling support from UNRWA. I'm sorry, US, Canada, UK, Finland, Australia, Italy, and Netherlands. It's genocide. The ruling just came out that if these people don't get food and help, they're dying. They're dying right now. Right. And because of that, this country and all 7 of these countries are believing some bullshit about 4 people out of 30,000, and you're going to stop funding. You're going to stop feeding all the kids.
And meanwhile, I mean, even if that were true, first of all, the whole terrorist designation is so upsetting because you could lob that accusation, and I sort of would, at every military operation and police force. So, and in every single one, there are going to be a few bad apples. And those 4 bad apples are now being used as an excuse to further the genocide being committed against Palestinians. And nobody is doing anything. Where are the Houthis?
Oops, sorry, that wasn't the one I meant to land on, but the Five Eyes, that's the Five Eyes countries pulling, plus a couple other, I meant to land on this one because Spain and Ireland are now getting more. Kudos to them. Here's Spain. They sent another $10 million in euros in Gaza today, tripled their funding to Palestine. So, we are the country that looks bad to everybody in the world. Those 7 countries, the UK and the US, are the colonialists of the world, and we are the empires of evil, essentially, now.
I mean, truly.
And everybody sees it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody sees it. It is still just, and I mean, of course, that's wonderful, but it's, on a much larger scale, it's like the George Floyd protests where, yes, we all see now the police brutality and the random killings and torture of our own citizens that go mostly unpunished. It's where most of the police budgets go to is, having to defend these sadistic officers, and then nothing changes. And so now, I mean, hundreds of people are still being killed every day. They're, they're being operated on with no anesthesia. They are losing limbs. They don't have clean water. They don't have electricity to clean the sewage. There's there's the downstream repercussions of the bombs, which are horrific enough. And just like destroying the infrastructure in Gaza, and nobody is dealing with that, and no one is stopping it. Spain, Ireland, and the Houthis. And we're now in World War III, basically. Yeah.
And yet, literally today, we're getting an article from Newsweek that Israel implemented more measures to prevent civilian casualties than any other nation in history. /opinion /bullshit /propaganda. I mean, that is just nonsense. And to look at the ruling, to see the death, the civilian to militant death ratio is the highest in history. It's the absolute highest.
Yep.
And whoever wrote that article should just be labeled forever propagandist. Get the fuck out of here. Nothing you say will ever matter.
But then they just keep bringing him back. I mean, seriously, I wish that's the way it were, but they just keep failing up. And it's like the David Leonard, he's done minimizing the COVID.
It's hey, if you lie to our employees, we'll make you a manager.
Right, exactly.
That's how it works in this country. But I did want to highlight, one good thing.
That's right. World's biggest coffee chain cuts sales forecast and misses market expectations amid boycott. So, the reason they try and make those boycott divestment movements illegal is because they work. It's how we affected change. I mean, not the U.S. The U.S. sat out for the U.S. and Israel were South Africa's biggest supporters, but it was the weight of the world condemning them and divesting from them financially that forced South Africa to end its apartheid. And that's what's going to have to happen with Israel. But in the meantime, we're just watching tens of thousands of people be slaughtered and whole family lines wiped out. We didn't talk much about the New York Times rape story. The Gray Zone has done, I think, really fantastic and brave work. It's difficult, I think, to talk about rape allegations, especially since we know wherever there's war, there are war crimes, and wherever there's war, there's rape. So likely there was rape, then we know the IDF is accused of rape all the time. But the manufactured story about using it as part of their weapon, the weapon of sexual assault and rape, has pretty much fallen apart. And that is really due to the Gray Zone and Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate's reporting, and Electric Intifada and Mondo Weiss. They've all done really fantastic reporting, so much so that even though they're not credited in this story from The Intercept does report that the New York Times Daily podcast, which basically takes, prepackaged stories from the New York Times and then runs them to kind of give them, to highlight them more, sell it to their liberal crowd. They tabled it. They pulled it. They didn't do it because they could not confirm many of the details, and too many of the witnesses were found to be unreliable. So just putting that out there. My face is
absolutely
red.
And I have no doubt that, tragic, obviously, war and rape, but strategically, if you're Hamas, they didn't go over there to rape people as a group. It would have been the wrong message for what they were trying to do. Not that
they didn't have the time.
People,
the point was to take high target hostages and go back, right? Right. And so much, even, one of the cousins of a hostage was on Israeli TV. There's a long clip. There she is, straight, of her talking about the Hannibal Directive being used and how their families who are hostages are being killed by Israelis. So by the IDF, there's no one in Israel who thinks that the primary reason for this genocide of Palestinians is to get back hostages. The only time any hostages have been released was during the ceasefire. And other than that, the 3 who escaped were killed by the IDF point blank. So the Israelis seem to feel more freedom to talk about the Hannibal Directive and the atrocities that are being carried out by the IDF than U.S. media.
Which is kind of crazy that our media is not reporting on it. But
it is insane.